Culture, literature, rise and growth of regional languages. Period from 650 to 1200. This is the topic of our today's discussion. Now, what is first language and literature? From the very beginning, this thing is to be kept in mind that language and literature are closely connected. Language presupposes a particular speech community, and that speech community in turn presupposes a territory where they live in. Language is related to one's thought and feeling. Then what is literature? Literature is the mirror of the age in which it flourishes. A poet or a novelist is bound to be influenced by the facts and ideas of contemporary life. Now that influence is reflected quite naturally through his writings. What about the period? The period from 650 to 1200, what is peculiar about it? This period has been currently delineated or described as the early medieval period. It was marked by an unprecedented growth of a regional identity, and that is its peculiarity. Yes?
Ma'am, how do you come to know about the growth of this regional identity?
Very good, a very good question. And well, in one sentence, the answer can be given that this marked growth, this unprecedented growth of regional identity was visible in almost every sphere, every domain, polity, society and culture. Another thing is that this early medieval period was a period between the early historical age and the medieval periods of Indian history. Now we will be discussing as a background, a close perusal, a close study of a survey of available literature on the subject. Here the names of some books you can take down. One by Brojodulal Chattopadhyay, The Making of Early Medieval India. The other by the eminent historian R.S. Sharma, Early Medieval Indian Society, A Study in Feudalization. Another edited work we have, a very interesting, a readable work, that is a source book of Indian civilization. The names of the four editors are Brojodulal Chattopadhyay, Nihar Ranjan Rai, V.R. Mani, Ranabir Chakraborty. Now all these works, they proclaim the emergence of several regional polities, regional kingdoms during this time, some of which assumed imperial proportions, meaning emerged as empires. Now quite naturally, the coexistence of these regional powers resulted in military conflicts, and what is once again peculiar is that always military conflicts, military exploits or warfare did not bring about territorial expansion. And some of these powers, such as the Palas and Senas of Bengal and Bihar, the Gurjara Pratiharas of Malwa and Rajputana, the Rashtrakutas of the Deccan, and finally the Cholas in the far south, all remained rooted to their respective regions. You are asking about that regional identity, an unprecedented growth of regional identity. So it must be clear by this time that in the domain of polity, that was quite distinct, quite clear. Now what about the economic sphere? Here we have to mention the name of R.S. Sharma, who has detected a transformation during this early medieval period. How a transformation, or in what manner? A transformation from money or market economy to natural economy. You must be knowing what is natural economy. Now ruralization, emphasis on everything rural, that is importance of villages in very simple language, became the hallmark of the period, and villages emerged as units of production. Now automatically a consequence of this, or a concomitant result, was decline of the urban centers of the early historical age, urban centers meaning towns and cities, and also trade and commerce, commercial networks. And two other new developments. First, remuneration being made in land as a substitute for cash, a very, very important development, and the migration of different social groups to the villages. That was something marked. Now, these developments in the economic sphere brought about, in its turn, changes in the social scenario. A very striking change was the growth of a new social class. What was this new social class? A new social class meaning growth of an intermediary landholding class. Now, this class was the creation of two policies. One, that remuneration which was being made in land instead of cash, and secondly, land grants were made formally to religious establishments, but later on to secular people also. Now, this new class alone cannot comprise the society. There must be some other classes at the end of the social ladder, and they were the peasantry, whose plight, whose condition was absolutely, it was miserable rather, because they were subjected to all sorts of exploitation, such as immobility, forced labor, and payment of rent at exorbitant rates. Now, the last domain that remains is a very significant domain, that is religion. Here, a few things have to be kept in mind. Now, first we find proliferation of sects and subsects. What does that mean? During this time we find a number of religious sects, religious orders. They broke away or got detached from Brahmin orthodoxy and domination of Sanskrit. They wanted to bring about a popular religious awakening by giving the common people simple forms of worship through their own language. Without language, you cannot communicate with anybody. So that is very vital. So herein lies one factor why we come across the growth of regional languages or vernaculars during this particular period. Another thing is the domination or coming to the forefront of two things. One is bhakti. Bhakti movement was a phenomena of this period, and it was very much noticed in South India. And we come across the huge corpus of devotional literature of the Vaishnava Alvars. The Vaishnava saints in South India were known as the Alvars, and the Shaiva saints were known as Nayanars. The third factor or the third thing to be mentioned is also the importance laid on Shakti. What is Shakti? Shakti meant coming to the forefront, to the limelight of so long dormant forces. Here we find that some local cults, peripheral deities, they started coming to the limelight. They emerged as important cults, and herein also we find growth of regional identity. For example, Kamakya in Assam, Viraja in Orissa, Aranyabashini in Rajasthan, just to cite a few examples. So in this way we find that in different domains, more or less, regional identity, the question that she had put up, that particular thing became visible. All these has to find out some expression, and the medium of expression was this regional languages. The rise and growth which took place, its evolution which took place during the period of our present survey. One thing is to be kept in mind, that three things, script, language, literature, these three are very, very important and regarded as the medium or the means of social communication. And the huge literature which came up during this time, they were also marked by a regional spirit. With this, we come to the end of the background. One thing that is to be kept in mind is that we have two groups of languages, two groups of regional languages. One, the North Indian languages. When I mean North, I mean that these were spoken in Deccan, Western India as well as Eastern India. North Indian languages, and the other South Indian languages.
Ma'am, how did these regional languages originate?
I was speaking about the two groups of languages. Now, the North Indian languages I was speaking about can be regarded as the languages belonging to the Indo-Aryan group of language, Indo-Aryan family. And the other, the South Indian languages, they belong to the Dravidian group of languages. Now, the North Indian languages, their evolution was during this period particularly, it was very slow. And they were in their incipient form or rudimentary form. Just it has evolved. But compared to that, as it will be evident from the course of our discussion, that South Indian languages belonging to the Dravidian group, they had emerged, they had evolved or grown comparatively in an earlier age, and during this time they had attained the stage of maturity. We have Sanskrit in the Vedic period, Vedic Sanskrit, language of the Aryans, and the first written work, first literature is the Vedas, Vedic literature. From that Vedic Sanskrit, we have classical Sanskrit. Classical Sanskrit came into vogue or was patronized during the Gupta rule. Classical Sanskrit gave way to four Prakrits spoken in four different parts of the country. One was Magadhi, spoken in Magad region, Shaurosheni in Mathura region, Poishachi in northwestern part of the country, and Maharashtri in Maharashtra region. Now, these Prakrits later on degenerated into another form, and that is called Apobhromsho. And from these Apobhromshos emerged the language of the modern times, these regional languages.
Excuse me, ma'am, in what forms were the literature of this period available to us?
Thank you for your interesting question. It is to be kept in mind that whatever was written during that time, it was written manually and it is still available in manuscript forms. As the printing was not actually discovered at that time, and so no question of printed works. So everything was copied and written manually, and the mode or medium of literature was these manuscripts. The earliest specimen, once again, of the early Bengali language, which was called Gauro Prakrit, was the Chorjapad. Now, what were these Chorjapads? You can make out from the very word pod that these were compositions in verse, not prose. Composed by whom? By the Buddhist monks belonging to the Mahayana sect of Buddhism. And these Buddhist monks, here when they came in Bengal and Bihar, they received the patronage of the Buddhist Pala kings. They composed several verses, the Chorja Gitis, hymns, and through these Chorja Gitis, they actually they wanted to reveal the secret of their religion, philosophical discourses, ethics, morality, and the like. Soon after the Pala rule ended, or the Palas gave way to the coming of the Senas, a change took place. Now, who were the Senas? They were patrons of the Sanskrit knowing Brahmin Pandits. Quite naturally, the importance of the Buddhist monks was reduced. They were persecuted, and we find during the Sena rule some important Sanskrit works such as Geet Govindam of Jayadev, Pavan Doot of Dhoi, and a very famous work you must all be knowing, Ramcharit of Sandhya Karanand. Very close to Bengal was Orissa, lying between North India and South India on the eastern coast of India, Coromandel coast. So Orissan culture has been found to be a mixture of the culture of the Aryans as well as the Dravidians. Along with that, there was again another peculiarity, that is, so far as Orissa's population is concerned, this also one must be knowing that a large portion of it comprises of the tribals. Tribals very much indigenous to that land. So the culture not only contained traits of features, characteristics of Aryan culture, Dravidian culture, but also of the tribal, indigenous tribal culture. Like the Pala kings, we have here the Bhoma kings, Bhomakars. They also extended patronage to the Buddhist monks who composed verses, hymns, and revealing through it the philosophy or their ethics or their religious theme, religious subjects, whatever they want to convey. Very similar. And again, the Bhoma kings' rule was followed by the Hindu solars, Gangas and then solars. Here also it resembles the Senas of Bengal. These imperial Ganga and solar kings, they started patronizing once again Sanskrit knowing Brahmin Pandits, and as soon as this particular tendency develops, automatically the earlier religion loses its importance, and these Buddhist monks are once again subjected to persecution. However, the earliest remains of Oriya literate language is to be found in an inscription of one of the kings of Kalinga. His name was Anantavarma Vajrahasta Deva. Assam, that we now know, was actually known as Pragjyotish. After that, it came to be known as Kamrup. Here, the language formally was Kamrupi Prakrit, then Kamrupi Apobhrangsho, and then Kamrupi or early Assamese. Very crude compositions in this early Assamese during our period. One is wise maxims, what we called proverbs of one person, Dak Mahapurush. And these are very important sources to know about the customs, the religion of the land. These maxims were popular in eastern India, Bengal, Bihar, Nepal. And the others, this is very common, you must be knowing, Bihu festival of Assam, a few folk songs, Bihu Geets, were composed during this time. And last but not the least, Marathi. Maharashtra, its territorial expansion was much greater, much bigger compared to modern times. What today we mean by Maharashtra state. It extended up to Mysore. And Maharashtra, this land of the Marathas, was ruled by the Rashtrakuta kings for more than 200 years. And they were great patrons of art, literature, men of letters, but they only patronized Sanskrit knowing Pandits. Because early Marathi began quite late in the 10th century, and this early Marathi can be found on the foot of a huge monolithic statue at Shravan Belgola of Saint Gomateshwara. That is the first specimen of Marathi language. Later on came the Yadava kings, several types of literature we come across. There were eulogies of kings, praise works, praises of kings. There were devotional literature, religious works, philosophical discourses. One such work was Mukunda Raj's Vivek Sindhu. We have another group of languages, and they belong to the Dravidian group. They were the 4 South Indian languages: Tamil, Kannada, Telugu, and Malayalam. Now, in South India, Sanskrit was the language of the high and sophisticated culture. At the same time, Sanskrit helped these vernaculars to emerge, to grow and attain literary status. The earliest of the South Indian languages was Tamil. There are several phases in the evolution of Tamil language and literature. The earliest age was Sangam age. Sangam literature was actually the outcome of the fusion of two cultures, two totally different cultures. One, the Aryan culture, and the other, that is Sanskrit culture, and the other, Tamil, very much indigenous. During the next phase, that is after the Sangam age, one finds a marked influence of Sanskrit. Sanskrit religious works, works on polity, ethics and other subjects were being translated. Not only translated, ideas were borrowed. For example, we come across one work, actually a comprehensive manual on ethics, polity and love. This particular work was named Kural of Tiruvalluvar. He was a Jain writer and his work resembled the works of Manu, Kautilya and Vatshaya.
Ma'am, what role did religion play in the development of South Indian languages?
Religion did play a very important role. By this time, you must be marking or trying to understand some differences were there so far as the language, the development, the evolution of languages in North India and South India are concerned. Here, the Vaishnava Alvars, I have already mentioned, and the Shaiva Nayanar saints played a vital role. Another notable thing, that is, the Chola period was the golden age of Tamil literature. This must be kept in mind. And here, once again, several works were composed, most notable Kamban's Ramayanam. You can understand it was the Ramayan that we have, that's translation of that. And this is regarded as the greatest epic. Kamban's Ramayanam is regarded as the greatest epic in Tamil literature. Then we have Kannada. In the case of Kannada, we find that the Jain saints, Jain monks played a vital role. In the case of the Kannada language and literature, in their history of their evolution, we find names of three Jain writers, Pampa, Punna and Ranna. They all wrote about the life of the Jain Tirthankaras. Pampa wrote Adi Puran, life of the first Tirthankara. He was followed by Punna, who wrote Shanti Puran and wrote about the history of the 16th Tirthankara, and finally was Ranna, who wrote Ajita Puran. The content of this Ajita Puran was the life of the second Tirthankara. Telugu language developed a little later. Here, Sanskrit's influence was once again marked, and we come across the work of one writer, Nannaya, who translated a few porbos or phases of Mahabharata that we have, Adi Porbo, Shobha Porbo. Now, here also again religion played a vital role. You must be knowing about Veerashaivism. This particular religious sect developed in the Telugu country in the 12th century, and several works were composed by these men of the religious order, and the name of one such saint was Mallikarjun Pandit, who wrote Shiva Tattva Sharan. It contained what is actually the philosophy of this Veerashaivism in 500 verses. And finally we come to Malayalam, which actually for a long time remained a part of the Telugu and Kannada language, and it was only after the 13th century that it could assert itself as a separate, distinct language.